Why would... Okay, cool. Do you want to start?
What am I going to talk about then? Blender development? I don't know anything of Blender development. So what do people want to know? Something about 2.8 or the future or the past or today or... An introduction. Ah, I thought you guys started already. Okay, so this is the developer Ask Me Anything session. And the idea is that you guys have questions for this enormous team. And these are the people who are making Blender currently. So if you have questions about how to develop Blender, how to get involved with Blender, or why certain features are still not working, or when are we going to do something, this is your opportunity to get them to do something for you. Right? Yeah? So who has an issue or an idea or questions?
Just something I would need, I think it's not that complicated, in the 3D Print toolbox. When you want to export an STL for 3D print, either you go to the File menu, and if you have a multiple selection with, let's say, 20 objects, it will make one STL of the 20 objects. And if you go in the Export in the 3D Print toolbox, it will export only one object. And I would have liked, if I make an assembly of 5 objects, in the 3D Print toolbox, I click Export with a multiple selection, and I get my 25 STLs, each with the name, like the 3D Print toolbox does it already. But the example I've shown, I have 754 pieces to export, so I can't click 754 times, because I'm too lazy. So I count on you to be less lazy than I am, if it's possible.
It's Campbell.
Campbell?
Yeah, he works on 3D
But he's the Campbell replacement.
I mean, it's like a quick hack. It could be done in a few minutes, in theory at least. So just remind me later, and I should be able to hide it or do it for Campbell or whatever.
But there was yesterday somebody who had an STL question too. He said that Blender still exports with the right or the wrong size for STL. So you always have to multiply it with 1,000. And I said, what? I mean, Blender is the oldest 3D program that does support STL. We had it since 2002. But the issue seems to be that STL doesn't have a real standard for scale. But is this right? Is this true? Yes. Is the size always wrong? Yeah. Then why don't we fix it?
Because there are so many printers with so many different sizes that they expect, so we can't really fix it. It's just, you just had to click every time a combo box with Ultimaker or MakerBot or whatever you'd like to export, and then it would be maybe fixable until they introduce a new version that expects another size, so yeah.
But
it's a bit tedious.
Somebody from Ireland realized,
Mm-hmm.
At the very least, we could pick a standard to at least say, hey, this is the standard that it's based on.
Yeah.
So
that would be doable. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we have a standard. So right now we have exporting at 1 Blender unit value, which is usually 1 meter. It's just that this file format does not store any data about scale. So we can change if we want. We can change the default scale value, but it's still a random decision. We do not have a real metric unit in the file format, so.
New question. A question about edited normals, custom normals, and the plans. Any plans for that? I guess it's for Bastien. Right. About edited normals and the plans for the future, or if it's you consider it done for now. I'm thinking of the modifier. I'm totally okay with the features that are in the modifier, but I'm wondering about all of the times I would prefer to do things just by selecting edges and vertices and doing it directly as an operator, not as a modifier and a link to another mesh. Is there a plan for that?
Well, it's totally not done, that's for sure. I mean, it was just the first step who was done in master. There's no real definite plans currently because we have some design issue right now. We only can select mesh, vertices, edge, or faces. And to be really able to work on custom normals, we would need to introduce the fourth data type that we have in Blender, that is face corner. We call it loop in the code. And right now it's totally not exposed in the user interface. So it's kind of a big project, and I just really didn't have time to work on it so far. But it has to be done at one point anyway. Yeah. I mean, you can't procedural editing of normals is fine for a set of situations, but it cannot be used everywhere. Obviously, sometimes you just want to tweak your normals by hand, and that has to be done in edit mode, and that's just not supported currently. But it's a to-do. Yeah.
Okay, and you guys also look like as if it's fun. I made a new picture of the panorama. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's it. That's my question.
I'm using the data transfer modifier or operator in a script to transfer all sorts of attributes from one model to another. And I was wondering, it doesn't support, for instance, transferring material assignments. And the one question is, why not? And could it possibly? And another thing is, going further, you can think of like 10,000 things you can transfer probably. And could it maybe make sense to offer like a generic API that offers like the low-level magic that does the sort of mapping, what correlates to what, but lets the user sort of decide what to transfer?
Yeah, right. I mean, data transfer is a bit same thing as custom normals. It's the first basics are working, but it's not really finished. We can add more. Of course, we can add more data to transfer. And it was also designed from start with a generic system in the background. I mean, we have in BKE core some generic code that defines the mapping between the elements, and that then we use that mapping to handle the actual data transfer. So if we expose that to an API, to the Python API, it could be totally possible to add transfer for any kind of data type.
A question about rendering, and forgive me for being ignorant, but I can't help it. Is there any plan to kind of bring rendering capabilities from kind of distributed computing more into Blender? So, for example, if I don't have access to rendering, apart from my own GPU, is there plans to have some kind of magic button that says send to some kind of magic place where rendering happens really quickly?
Well, currently we have like a network Blender add-on which kind of broken, and we also have work on Flamenco Render Farm, but also there is like hidden possibility in Cycles itself to use network rendering, which is not exposed because of the issues with it, because it's not fully implemented yet, but we are looking into improving the situation, and maybe in the future we would be able to just set up some cluster and then hit Shift Z in viewport and have it rendered in cluster, have more instant feedback for this. Well, definitely there are plans for this, and just a matter of implementing this. Yes. Do you want to talk about this? Because actually Martin is working on network render. Well, of course you do.
You want to swap place? Go? Okay.
No?
I have just two questions. One, first is stupid. Sometimes switching object mode and edit mode, it's not clear where you are. So it's possible to have some color somewhere that can avoid this error. Some button, different color in the buttons or frame somewhere. Because I know that inside.
The whole interface pink.
No, I know. But yes, yes. Yes, something. And for the tool for take measure, for architecture, sometimes we need to manage the dimension better. It's possible to think to some tool that can take the measure in a faster way.
Whatever.
Take measure, take dimension.
I mean, there's a couple of tools in Core that can already do it. I mean, there are some measurement tools and whatnot, but there's also a couple of really excellent free add-ons. I think one called Measurement by Antonia that does a pretty good job. So maybe look at those, but we should probably support it better for measuring actual links and such. But a lot of the work that Bastion did as far as getting real units better supported across transforms has already done a lot of work to do that. But yeah, more could be done.
And what did Campbell add? But he also added something, right? For measuring.
Yeah, he added the ruler tool that is, I think, combined with 3D Print Toolbox. Separate, but yeah, there is a ruler add-on. Oh, it's built in. Okay.
Okay.
So there's that.
But you can measure with the ruler. Ah, the toolbar. You tried that one?
It's
Yeah, okay. But you want a better one. And how does a better one? But how does a better one look like? How does it work? Can you describe how it works? Like you want to select two vertices and then you want to have.
No, not vertices. The problem is a little bit deeper because I work with architect students and so. And they, most of the time, they are newcomers, they begin. And they think in two dimensions. And they think in plan and section. And so I know that Blender is made for working 3D in another way. But they ask me ever, and sometimes I to myself too, something to take the measure. They ask me, how can I measure the dimension, the measure? I don't know, when you work with Blender, it's fast, it's very fast. But maybe something that can help. Otherwise, they let, after the course, they let the Blender, they use another software. This is my problem.
But my problem is that we need people who help designing measurement tools in a way that it fits nicely in Blender and that it can be used by architects and that it's not in the way for people who want to use Blender in a fast way. So this is not more a design topic than an issue of when are you going to do it. It's more like how are you going to do it. You have an answer for that?
Yes, the add-on Measure It is very nice, except that the render is not very good. But I think the main flaw in the ruler protractor is that you cannot snap the first point of measurement. So if you want to measure between two vertices, as it's Control left click to put the first point, you cannot snap it. So you have to draw the line and then select the first point and snap it. And this is just horrible. So it's the only thing that is very weak in this tool, except that it's nice.
yes.
Campbell watching? No. No. If you look in IFC, is he there? He would be there on the screen.
I have other things, if I can. Sorry, I have two other things that are quite problematic when teaching, is that the default size of the object you add is linked to the size of the grid. It's not linked to the metric scale. So if you change, for example, you add a cube, you start Blender, you delete the cube, you add a cube, it's 2 meter size. Then you change the size of the grid to half. You add a sphere, it will be 1 meter size. And then you add a new sphere, it will be still 1 meter because it remembers the last sphere is 1 meter. You change the grid again, but as you already added a sphere, it will still be 1 meter. You add a cylinder, it will be 2 meter. And it's quite disturbing. It's not very... Yeah.
I did it. Yeah. Oh no. So I tried to, beginning developers, they try to be very optimal, right? To try to only write 5 lines of code that does everything. So a lot of my old code tries to do that, and that makes it very unreadable. So I made a function that was capable of adding cubes and spheres and everything, like very, very compact, because a cube is some kind of a sphere, but then only with 6 faces, right? So, but then how do you measure that as a radius? So the sphere with radius 1 has a diameter of 2. So the cube has a radius of 1. That's why. And it fits beautifully if you have a grid, right, with those lines, and then the cube will be fitting very nicely in the grid. If the cube would be 1, it would be very ugly. But then it doesn't fit, right? And then you see the cube, but it's not fitting, right? Huh? No? So I like it that way, but I can imagine it is not what you expect. Huh? So we could put that on the 2.8 list to fix it once.
Yeah, what you were talking about is mostly the fact that there is a remembrance of the previous settings when you're using an operator to, in theory, ease redoing the same thing based on the settings you used. So I don't know, maybe for size we could just disable that. It's possible. We have it already in code, so... Yeah. No, but it's not the dependency on the grid size. It's that once you have added an object type with a grid size.
Sorry. The problem is that he is having a grid sized 1 meter. Every grid pattern is 1 meter. And when he adds an object, then it's 1 meter tall or height. But when he then scales the grid to a smaller portion or to an even larger portion, and then adds another object, then it's 1 meter, but it's 3 meter, for example, because he scaled the grid by 3. Even if he'd like to add just one object that is 1 meter, because previously, all his measurements are based on the grid size that he initially chosen. Yeah. No, it's not. So it could depend on the unit size.
You scale the grid, and if you add another object.
Okay. To come back on the render farm. I don't know if somebody of Cineca is here from Italy, but Cineca is one of your most dedicated user groups, and they have a render farm. Cineca is the supercomputer center of Italy. They have really a lot of dedicated people to Blender, and they have a dedicated Blender render farm. I don't want to know. I just want to say that be aware that there is a render farm that everybody can use for free. Yeah? Yes. What is the URL? Cineca.italy, .it. So have a look. I can, if you want, I can give you the contact people, but it's there and it's for free. So.
How big is it?
They have supercomputers. They are in the top 10 in the world. So. Wow. Yes. That's why I tell you.
Cineca.italy.
So can I ask the question then back? Why didn't you tell it while we've been rendering Gooseberry?
Okay. Can I? Okay. I'm pretty new to Blender and also to Python, but I've been doing some Python scripting. And my question is, okay, I had two problems in the beginning. One is basically the Python console, which is, to my opinion, not working very well. I mean, it's maybe one of the best ways to make Blender crash, in my opinion. And the second problem was debugging. I had some problems in setting Eclipse for the debugging of scripts in Blender. And I want to know if there is any plan to add a debug mode when you run a Python script in Blender. That's it.
I could give you the URL to a GitHub that I have with an extension that actually enables this. It loads an egg file that comes with either Eclipse or PyCharm, and then you just hit the button and it will connect to your debugger. I think that's the easiest we can get. Oh, I don't know my URL by heart, but we can make a code blog about it.
If you can make Blender crash in one line Python, then you should report that, and then we fix it. You should fix everything, which is so easy. No, why? Why not?
Because you can store a reference to an object, then remove this object for a scene, and then try to dereference this object in Python. This we cannot solve by definition. There is actually a full section in the Python API documentation which says, "Hey, do not do this, ever, in your worst nightmare, don't do this." And if this is if those rules are met,
do you do that?
Even enough to change the name of a bone, for example, and I don't know if it happens to.
Well, it kind of depends on what exactly you're doing, but if you feel like it shouldn't crash that, then just submit a bug report to us. And
if I ask for a matrix, I don't know.
So.
The problem is, of course, that if you run a Python script, you can do lots of things with the Blender data, but only at some moment the Blender data gets validated by Blender itself. So you need an event and signals, and then it goes to Blender, and then it fixes stuff. But it might be possible that running your script then creates invalid commands because you haven't been updating Blender in between. And that is a weak point of Blender itself. It's not of the Python scripting API, but it is programming language, you know. This programming is not... yeah, it's not kindergarten, jawel, yeah. You, and then you, and then you.
Hi, yes. Okay. Okay. I have just a quick question about smoke and volumetric data. Forgive me if the question is too basic, too simple, too stupid. I'm sorry for that, but just I want to say that I work with a software that its name is StarCCM Plus, and the software make aerodynamics simulation. So create also fluid, smoke, everything that is volumetric. Now I'm trying to understand if I can or not import this data into Blender, and if it's possible, how? If it's not possible, why? Thank you.
Do you want to answer?
You have to.
Well, short answer is it's not really possible to import this data yet. And why? It's just because it was not implemented. Oh, what did you expect? I mean, well, it wasn't really decided to be implemented, but there are now plans to integrate all the stuff like Alembic caching and OpenVDB, which should help importing, interchanging caches between different applications and make your life easier. Yeah, that was a presentation from Lucas this morning. Yeah, so now it's documented on YouTube. Wait, what? In 2.8 something? 20. 4 until then, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know what specific file format that software uses, but I think OpenVDB is a pretty generic file format for exchanging volumetric data in general. And we have a patch that is currently being reviewed for having a cache that can load, at least for the smoke simulation, can load an OpenVDB file into Blender. And apart from that, I mean, the smoke data in Blender is really simple. It's basically just a XYZ volumetric dense texture, and it would be really simple to just write an importer for that sort of thing. In C, yeah. It doesn't make it nice, but it's possible. Yeah.
Okay, so
I know the asset management in Blender is a very, very big topic, but there is just one little thing when you have like your main scene and then you do all your object in separated blend and then you like link one into the scene, you make a proxy to duplicate it. When you duplicate it, if you forget to do Alt-D to keep the link, and then you do like Control-D, so you make a local copy, then you can like have a big problem because your object is not linked anymore. So is there any way to tell like when you when you do Alt-D, when you duplicate with a link an object, to like outline with a different color? That will be really helpful, a bit like proxy, which are outlined in blue. So is that something that will be possible, or I'm just dreaming? And
There are like two different questions, because first I understand that you like create link armature, create a proxy, and then you make it a local link as well. Then yeah, that's actually asking for problems, and that's actually the reason why the proxies doesn't work in new dependency graph. And for this, I would love to make really robust proxy system which would just work everywhere, like and all the time. But second part of the question I didn't quite understand is that like if you've got like two objects which shares the same data, you want them to be different colors? If that's what you mean? No?
Okay, so yeah. You have a cube.
Yeah.
In one blend, and you have another blend. You link the cube from the first blend into the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's outlined in blue, but then you want to duplicate, so you make a proxy, right?
Oh, you cannot create proxy from cube.
Oh, okay. So maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Now, the proxy is very, very, very limited. It's only used for one copy. Animate a character.
Oh, okay.
That's it. Because then we stop coding. What we want is all stuff that we should have.
Oh, okay.
That's why it stops working, because it's not
It was not meant to. Yeah.
crafty stuff.
Okay.
So the people who know the proxy feature, I mean, I added it for, I think, Buck Bunny, and at that time we wanted to have characters in one file, and groups even, we had nice grouping feature, it was awesome. And then you can link the whole thing in, and then you have a non-editable character, which you then can add a local proxy armature on top of it, so you can move the bones of a local armature, but the rigger can keep updating the bunny and the other characters, which always get linked in and synchronized. So all of the development effort for proxy went to make sure that you can have characters referencing from another file. And what you mean is how you actively want to use proxy as well, of course, because you want to reference data from other files, and then you want to layer on top of that, like all the exceptions, or what you call it. And we should have a system for that in Blender to do that very nicely. And that is what one of the things in 2.8 or 2.9 or 3.0, at some moment we have to solve it. I know.
Yeah, maybe a comment on that. Yeah, we had this problem also with hair simulation on Gooseberry, basically, because the proxy system is made for a very specific use case. It's made for the pose of an armature, and it works for nothing else, basically. Yeah.
No, but that's good.
Yeah, it's okay. It works for that case. It works reasonably well. There are some corner cases that don't. Yeah.
I was first here. There were some people on this side who wanted to have questions too. You were the most urgent, and then you. And you.
Thank you.
You already had two.
Okay, I have one comment and one question. So the comment is that 1 year ago I said something about video sequence editor, and I asked for some more love for it or so. And it appears suddenly somehow that it really deserves that love, and now it's just awesome. We have new features, some development is going on, so I would like to say big thank you for this. Big, fat, shiny thank you and respect to you. So that's the one thing. And now the question about something different. I have sometimes have to check 100 Blender files at once because they are going to me from students' assignments, for example. And if I sometimes check that files, some of them appears to suspiciously similar to me. And I would like to have an opportunity to determine if they are not copied by students just to cheat me. So I need some feature which should serve as anti-cheating hack, for example, and it maybe should be served as some kind of ID which is assigned to each file when you're creating something new in Blender. Is that feature planned, or is there a way to implement
Actually,
this?
yeah, there is a plan. I mean, we also need some kind of diff tool for blend files. For example, when we are making change, we had an issue in, I think it was 274 or 275, I don't remember exactly. We changed a bit how custom data were stored in meshes, and it's added issues for, especially for third-party programs who were relying on some things, some kind of how the data is set in the Blender file. And I mean, for that kind of things, we need a tool to make a diff between blend files to see whether we're actually breaking something or not. And yeah, I intend to do that. I mean, Campbell and other guys too, I think, made a Python API which allows to read quite easily Blender files. So from that, it's really easy to make, for example, a JSON representation of not the data itself, but maybe the structures of the Blender file, and or even the data if you want to have tens of megabytes of textual file. But that means you then can easily go with a common diff tool and.
I was just going to add one thing. John Denning did a research project. Jonathan Denning's the PhD researcher at, I forget which university, but he's the guy that's working on RotopoFlow for me. He did a research project that diffs mesh models. So it only works for modeling, but it's able to compare the changes across the model and then track those changes. It's just using a custom build of Blender, but if you're doing this with students, it could be something you could look at to then actually be able to compare directly the changes in the model from start to finish at any point in time.
That's all. Just quick. That also relies a bit with the transfer data, because I mean, when I worked on the transfer data, I had to find a way to match meshes which are not exactly the same, so it could be used here too.
And this 2008 there was a Python script, Blender 8, and that could visualize blend files, including all the structures and everything inside. And you could query it and see it visually. So that is also possible.
I have a question. Did you guys introduce yourself to the people?
No.
I was one because I come in late. So you do that very quick and say what you do for Blender in the code, huh? What do you do? What did you do?
Okay, the last year I didn't do that much, but previously I worked on the file browser, user interface, mainly, yeah.
I mostly try and work on some of the UI stuff, committing a few things predominantly in Python and a little teeny bit in C.
And mesh modeling, you're part of the mesh modeling community.
Mesh modeling module group, I don't do any of the development.
Mostly the compositing.
I worked on the interface during 2.5, and nowadays it cycles.
Yeah.
Audio and a bit of game engine.
More game engine and a bit of user interface.
Mostly user interface, mesh editing, and now I'm working on linking, asset management, and all that.
And thousands of bug
FBX.
fixes and FBX. Oh no!
I'm working on the new viewport for 2.8 coming out, and I keep the 3D mice working on all platforms.
I used to work on cycles and a bunch of other stuff, and now I'm mostly doing bug fixes.
Yeah, I'm just hacking around on cycles and yeah, basically only light portals by now.
Oh, I do everything.
Ah, boo! You don't do documentation. Oh, you do documentation too, that's right.
Yeah, of course, and then you complain that it's too long.
Yeah.
UI.
Windows platform maintainer, Linux platform no, OS X, and waiting for Linux, then I'll be fine.
Game engine and other general stuff.
Hey, you!
Yeah.
File browser feature videos, maybe you've seen them, and a bit of hacking in the modifier section.
3D printing.
And 3D printing.
Nodes and physics and...
No, don't mention the P word, don't mention the P word.
No, and the other thing.
Oh. Mostly compositing and one-on-one kits. And Blend 8.
Okay, we go back to the question round. I think I was here.
Short question, game engine Python. Is there any plan or way to actually have a full bundled Python to be able to say you can use pip or you can use whatever Python module with the blender.app or .exe? Everything bundled? I don't know if that makes sense.
So basically, you're asking whether you can use external modules and install them with pip and have them working with the game engine. On some platforms that may be possible, but I don't know about Windows. I think there's a problem with compiled.
No, we actually ship our own Python because Visual Studio changes the ABI every release.
Yeah.
But since 2006 or 2005, I'm not sure, we started shipping like our Python. So there's also a Python.exe that you can use to run pip and have the same stuff. And it's of course possible to compile the whole of Blender as a Python module and use it that way if you're up to for that. Campbell's written some cool documentation on how to do awesome stuff with that.
When you link duplicate an object and you enter in edit mode, all the objects look the same, but there is only one selectable, of course, but there is no way to know which one is the original one.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of something we have to fix one way or the other. Either make all instance editable the same way, or it's probably just all code which has to be fixed.
Okay, I want to add something to the mirroring. When we build objects, it is always I sometimes need to select some points and give them the specific dimension. So I thought it would be good to have some feature that enables us to type in the dimension and get the result instantly. Also, when you move points or scale, so the dimension displayed somewhere changes instantly as we move points. I know it's possible with moving points, but no with scaling them to specific dimension.
Because scale works as a whole, not as the absolute.
It is possible?
You're absolutely right. The problem is that when scaling, it works as a multiple. So if you type in 2, wanting to get 2 meters from, say, a 1 meter cube, that's a terrible example because you'll get it 2 meters.
No.
The point is, you're going to multiply the original value by the inputted value.
Yeah,
so what you're wanting, if I understand correctly, is the ability to say, hey, the final result should be 2 or 10 or 15.
But not the entire object, but some portion of it, some points.
It's the selection, but I mean, it's kind of a matter of switching from real scaling to dimension setting. I mean, we already have a dimension setting in the interface. So.
Well, I think for 2.76, Campbell committed stuff where you can use number editors to modify coordinates of all the selected vertices. So okay, then you can just like type in there like the same value times 2 and then do it like 3 times and then it kind of works and everyone's happy.
And one thing that's maybe also not the most known feature of Blender, you can actually type in math formulas in the input fields. So if you want to have something divided by something as a scale, you can just type like 5 divided by 3 and hit enter.
No, well, maybe this is something you should open up Blender and then do it and then show it to them and then they will interact. This is too complicated for a session like this, I think. But we need to be hands-on with Blender.
I have tried the Python in Blender a little bit, but what is the workflow like in C, C++? Do you have to wait like half an hour each time you make a change, or can you recompile just a little bit of the program? How does it work?
Yes, you can just hit recompile and it will only recompile the changed bits.
And is it quick?
Depends on which bit you, because sometimes if you have like one header file, you change that, it detects the dependencies and maybe it has to recompile
there's a tree. And I was also wondering what IDE you use. Well, is the Visual Studio or Qt Creator? I don't know.
Qt Creator seems to be the most common among developers, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
So you want to become a Blender developer? Yeah, next year you will be sitting there. So we have to get a couple of extra rows here. So who is here going to become Blender developer in the coming year? Yeah, one, hey, there, yes. So are there problems we should help you guys with in getting it, making it easier to get in the code, or what is it, what we could do? Should we have a Blender at the conference, a beginning Blender course or so for developers? Like, okay, things scope out, how do you find the bug, how does the debugger work, questions about the editors, that kind of things. Would that be useful? But it's too late now, right? The conference is almost over. But what can we do online? Anything to make it easier? Huh?
Yeah, so I think Campbell actually did some videos about how to debug simple bugs and.
I had some plans about it, and I wanted to talk to you actually about it, but I even bought a microphone for it, so yeah, I think we can do something like that. What? Such videos?
Without going deep into the YouTube tutorials, I know that the best way for me to learn how you work is just to film yourself working for 5 hours in a row, see what kind of tools do you use, what kind of the way you commit, even you commit things on GitHub, or all the how you call that, the best way of doing it. I know I've learned a lot of things just by looking at the live into coding, and I would just love to be able to see you just coding in the way you work.
We did a live coding sessions, yeah, with a streaming coding camera on a screen, and then you see people typing. Huh?
Yeah, I guess it's a lot like 3D artists, and there's no short way to it. It's just a collection of small tools and tricks, and you gather it over time, and it just takes some time to get used to it.
But of course, you can make it easier by doing some tips and tricks videos.
So Jonathan said something about it today, but it wasn't enough. So I wanted to ask why to this day we only have 20 layers in Blender. 20 layers.
Oh.
Ah! Yeah, I know that's dramatic.
Well, because of reasons.
The reasons are we've got limited number of bits in unsigned integer, and we need some of them to be dedicated for local view as well. So because it was only 32 bits back in the day, so we only. Well, yeah. Well, you can, but it's just like historical reasons why it's 20 now. It's just nobody bumped it to int 64 or higher. Yeah,
but therefore we need a better, complete, better layer system and design for it.
Can someone change this number 20 in the code? It's probably very easy.
Very, very easy.
No.
Okay.
It's a bitmask. It's not easy or trivial. And we would only double it, maybe. We'd need to redo it to do really named layers. But
I have a design lying around for naming layers, how to do it in a way that you can keep it compatible backwards and forward, compatible even with the future and the past. But it's not simple, and I keep struggling with that. The interface then gets too big, because you need more than that 5 millimeters we have now for the buttons. Suddenly you need a couple of more, and the header there is already getting full too. So I've never really got that to work. So how do you make a good naming, layer naming system without again adding like 20 more buttons for people to manage? And that's a design thing still.
So is it because of design, the UI design, not because of the how code is dependent on this itself?
Yeah, both. I mentioned in the UI team talk about the fake user and how it's often criticized. The idea that you have to click the F and that Blender deletes the data that's not used. Do you all are happy with the design? No.
No?
Yeah, okay. That's one. Some of you are, some. I know also Jonathan is not happy.
What is your problem with it? Can you explain?
Users lose data this way, so.
But the problem is not the app. The problem is the losing data.
Yes. Also.
You should make sure that you never lose data.
You should never lose data. If the artist creates data. If an artist creates data within a blend file and that project is saved, they should never lose data unless the author explicitly says so.
I mean, it's also kind of part of the side tracks of the asset management project, because I've started cleaning quite a bit our code, which is handling, removing or remapping data blocks. And the problem is in Blender, it's a big kind of a database with many relations between data blocks. So if you want to delete one or replace it with something else, you have to handle it quite nice. And currently in the code, it's just handle a few specific cases, and I'm trying to make it work from Genic way of that.
What I already wanted for ages is the experimentation with not having to save in Blender ever. The whole idea of saving is retarded, right? Why would you save?
It's stupid. It's totally stupid.
But the Google Docs is doing it in a way that people accept it almost intuitively. And then you're getting used to it, right? I'm using spreadsheets in Google Docs, and you simply type, and you have your stuff there, and you close your browser, and you go back, and it's still there, which is really nice. But if you do that in OpenOffice, that doesn't work, and then you lose your stuff. So somehow it should be possible in Blender to do the same.
But sometimes in Google Docs you move something. Sometimes in Google Docs you add a list or something, and everything, just the whole list fucks up, and then you're just perfect. But as long as you keep a history, that would be fine. But as soon as you close Blender, just because usually when I do something, I experiment, and sometimes it looks wrong, so I just close or reopen the file again. And if it would have saved that would be bad, because then I always have to copy stuff and save it on a different layer to keep it.
But I simply mean to say that the moment when you lose data, the Blender uses is when you quit Blender, and we can facilitate that much better. The whole undo history could be dumped, and we could do all kinds of things that if you quit Blender and you start it, that would be the similar like hiding Blender and putting it back. Technically, there doesn't have to be a reason to have a different result. So if you want to start a new project, you should say, I want to have a new project. Blender, give me a clean slate, and Blender will give you a clean slate. You don't have to quit Blender and start Blender to get a clean working environment, right? So that's what an interface could do. It's a UMain Blender.
Yes, I just wanted to mention it. I got it here.
You read it? Yeah?
I got it here.
You got it with you?
Yeah, I got it with me.
You read it completely?
Not completely.
Not completely, but a little
I'm
bit.
a slow reader. I'm reading like 10 pages every 2 weeks or so. Oh, hold on. So it's a book by Jeff Reskins, the UMain interface, which is awesome.
Because there is the designer of the original Macintosh. He wrote a book, UMain Interface. I think it's now 10 years old or something.
It's from 2000, yeah, but it's more up to date than ever.
An extremely challenging design book because it goes against many things we think should be done in interfaces, but he is in many ways also right. And the interesting thing is you can find many things that are working in Blender now in this book. So, of course, I'm happy with that because he agrees with me. But it also means that even though some people might think that Blender is the most stupid thing on the planet, when there has been design behind this. So there is an idea of what I like. And the UMain interface book goes really far. For 90%, you will find him agreeing with how Blender is working. And which is even for the right mouse select, which is not my, I mean, people can use left mouse select if they want, that's not my issue. But this guy was the guy who told Mr. Steve Jobs that the Macintosh should only have one mouse key, period. He's the guy who is behind the one mouse key. And everybody hated him for it, because why would a computer only have one key, right? He even didn't want to have an off key on the computer. He thinks that's stupid. If you want the computer off, you pull the plug, right? Why would you have an off button on a computer? So lots of weird stuff on Macs you find in his book. But he writes at one moment, he said, okay, if a mouse would ever have 2 mouse buttons, then you can only accept it if that secondary mouse would be used for something very special, distinct, the non-modal idea. So left mouse is for all the actions, and then, for example, he said right mouse could be used for selecting. If you had a 2 mouse button. Anyway, I can recommend that book tremendously. So for he also, are people using Macs here? Some? I mean, they started, it was a bit annoying, they have the text editor and some other programs, they don't save anymore, right? So you start up the text editor or the preview image, and then you start hacking a bit in it, or you change the color, and then it saves it over without asking. It's not even like a temporary thing. It saves my files without asking. But this is a little bit the fault of Raskin, because he also doesn't want saving, right? You have to use the time machine, and then you can scroll back in time over what you're doing. And having this kind of time machine for Blender would be so nice, right? You start up Blender and you can go back and forth. No.
That'd be great.
You don't need it. Well, you want versioning. Backups, right? Okay, that's similar. Not impressed, okay. Well, cool.
Still a little bit about the saving thing. I'd like the prompt quit menu to be more like the convention that everyone agrees on, which is 3 buttons with save, don't save, and cancel the quitting. And the way it's in Blender right now, it just says, hey, you have changes that you didn't save, and you can say OK, and then it closes, or you can say cancel the closing, and then you go manually save. And I'd like to have a save button in there just for new people. I mean, I really don't ever lose data, but I think people might, and I don't think it's a good thing. So maybe just 3 buttons there.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Like, we don't even have this prompt on Linux like at all.
Yeah, there's a. I mean, yeah, okay.
Even worse, if you open the console window on Windows and you just close it with the X, boom, and we can't fix it. No, we can't. Wow, it could happen, but it would be really convoluted.
We're not good enough. No.
Hi there. This non-saving feature will prevent all that crashing and losing all data that we forgot to save previously?
There's nothing like that planned, so it's just an idea and a basic concept that I personally would like to get at some point, but it's not concrete.
Julian, think, or maybe Brecht, I think we could like make all these data blocks belong to some, you maybe forget these, because if we never throw anything away, the file might get kind of big, kind of fast for some people.
Yeah, we could create an overview of all the data blocks that will not be saved. And then just tell you, like, this stuff is going to get removed when you save it. Maybe you're happy with it, and then you can make your own choice.
You know the user preset keep session? If you go to file, you go to keep session, you should try that for a while. It's fun.
Oh, yeah.
But it's... because that one will, on quit, will save your complete thing, everything. And when you load it, you get everything back, always. So this is the first test what I wanted to have to see how it works. I use it all the time. If you do bug fixing, it's very practical because you have something, you quit Blender, and you can always get back what you're doing. But it's interesting to find out if that is a workflow that will help you, or is it a workflow that works against you? That's like the experiment.
Because you coded it back in the days, remember? The keep session. In your holidays, you made it. So this question actually about the saving thing, which is, it would be great if we could keep saving, but for this we really need granular saving. Working with a little monkey testing a thing is easy, but then you work with a 500 megabytes file, you don't want it to be saving all the time, otherwise it gets super slow. No, it's just make it granular saving, so that way you can, if you only change the action, save the action, just a few bytes, and then you can send it to incremental saving, and then you can push it online, to the cloud, maybe.
We are already using differential saving when we are doing undo. I mean, we are not saving the whole
thing,
the whole blend file each time. So
yeah,
it could probably be working much better. But I mean, we are already not storing. When you are editing your 5 megabyte of blend files, you are not saving 5 megabytes on each undo step.
Yeah, that would be great for the same reason that also when linking, for example, if something changed in another file in the material, you could only bring that instead of reload the whole thing.
That's actually part of the ID remap branch.
The ID for
it's
the asset management.
relocating and reloading on the fly the libraries, yes.
Cool. This is another question. It's coming online. It's coming from people watching on the streaming. And it's also related to the asset management. If there is a way, like you usually lose track of what is being used by what. So if you have a texture, for example, or an image, you don't know what's being used to, by. And sometimes you lose track. Sometimes it's used by something really silly. I made an add-on for that. It's in Amaranth, like a debug. And it really helps sometimes, like, I don't know, there is somebody open the blend file, using an image as a background of a screen that is not even being used. But that image is linked, so it's referenced. And that in the old OOPS in 2.4 was great, because then you can see the tree. Are there plans for that in the OOPS window? It's amazing. Are there plans for that for the new
I
asset
think you half can do it with the outliner already. I mean, in the blend files, you can view all libraries who are used. But we need to enhance that.
But not images, like you can see the...
Oh, images themselves, yeah.
It's a data block, for example. It's used by this object, this texture, this screen background. I made a really stupid add-on that loops through everything. It's super slow.
Yeah, I mean, we need it, I agree.
For the asset management, it would be awesome. That
it's part of the asset management project, actually. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
But I just have to find good ways to do it, because, I mean, the tree view is not really helping here.
About proportional editing, I spoke a little bit yesterday during my talk, but I will explain. For now, we can just select an area, so just select, for example, a vertex, and then you select the area around the vertex. Is there any possibilities that we can select, for example, the one vertex, and then having an effect on the two vertexes on the right of this one, just for example, not selecting an area, but moving just the vertexes we want after that?
That would be more a Campbell question, really, because, I mean, he is really the expert in this area. We currently have modes in proportional editing that detect links between geometry. So for example, if you have a cut between two parts of your geometry, if you are trying to edit one part, it won't move across that border and edit the other part. I guess from that it could be pretty, well, not easy, but we could add other modes working the same way. The question is then, how do you determine which part you want to edit or you want to keep?
Well, that's simple. It's the same as in a sculpt mode where you've got like a texture which affects like how much pressure on particular area of a brush you've got. So in theory, instead of like having like a predefined fall-off curve for the proportional editing, you could also use a texture which would define how exactly you want to affect on the on the vertices, and then do some all sorts of weird and wonderful effects from this. It's pretty simple actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's a masking system. It's simple, but it might be not really easy to use if you want to be quickly able to say, I don't want that part of the mesh to be edited, and that I want it, and we could try to think about better, quicker system maybe. But
sorry, is it possible to raise the number of UV maps an object can have? The limit now is 8. It could be possible to raise the number of UV maps an object can have. Yeah, right now it's 8.
But, I mean, I thought it was unlimited except for Blender internal, or is there still a global limit?
Yes, it's currently a global limit, and it's possible to get rid of it. There is even a constant in the code which you can change, and then Blender internal will just break, but cycles will keep working. So. No, it's all Blender internal. Cycles handle this nicely, and it's only Blender internal. Which, well, because of the way they pass to the GPU, for example. Because
I mean, it's just in Blender internal. There's some data structures where it was easier to make a fixed size array instead of a dynamic size. So it's totally fixable. But no one, I mean, I've never heard anyone complain about it before. So maybe it's time to fix it. I don't know.
Thanks.
I'm just wondering why the baseline version of CMake is so ancient. It's like the CMake files look really ugly. Nowadays there are a lot of cleaner target constructs, and but it's kind of not possible to use it because there's some compatibility with the ancient version, and I just wonder why that is.
Well, if you want to see ugly CMake files, I suggest you look into some of the dependencies of Blender, and I won't name them right now, but Blender has pretty nice CMake files.
I mean, we're pretty conservative in bumping things in general, because there are people with older operating systems that we try to support them. Sergey is pretty.
He's gonna say this.
No, well, you are conservative, man. Yeah, that's good. No, and it's good, but I'm not sure what the minimum real CMake is we support now, but it's probably 2.8 something. And we could at some point go a bit higher in the future.
It's 2.8 for all operation system apart from latest OS X, where we require 3.2.
Hello, I have a strange issue. I'm using a mapping node into the node editor, in the material editor. And I'm trying to animate a value in the mapping node. And Blender lets me do it. But even if I have the curves and all the values are changing, it never gets updated, neither in the viewport or the renderer.
Well, can you submit a bug report? Or?
I think it was already submitted, bug report.
What was the
not by
answer?
me, but it was closed or marked as invalid, if I remember well.
But what was
it's,
the reasoning?
It's around from
Who was this,
2011.
and what was the reasoning behind of this? Also, one more thing, you might want to check it with new dependency graph.
I tried, it didn't work.
Well, can you submit report again?
I can show you later. Yeah. After, yeah.
No,
Okay.
it's better to
okay?
submit a report.
It was coding holiday.
Oh. He doesn't like the human talking that much.
One more issue I encounter quite often. When I'm sculpting, I can center my view with numpad comma on my last stroke. And it's really, really handy if you're working on some cavity area, for example, and it's super awesome. But whenever I try the same thing in texture painting, weight painting, vertex painting, it doesn't work. Like, I can't center on my last stroke. And so when I'm trying to get, I don't know, paint the inside of a mouth area, for example, with vertex, with texture paint, for example, and I try to center my view into the mouth, it's really hard. But I could just go to sculpt mode, set my weight to 0, click once, and then I have my center there. I'd like that same feature for every brush stroke in other modes.
So whenever that feature was added, I think it's strictly a key map issue, because that should actually work across all the paint modes. But it's not a paint. It's oh. Never mind.
So I originally had a request to implement this for sculpting, where it kind of makes sense, and because of sculpting is actually using a bit different internal stroke handling things, so it was not exposed to other painting modes. So, but it's pretty simple to support for other painting modes and make you happy. So yeah. Don't know, Anthony, who is not here, so it's me probably again.
I mean, of course, this session is very useful and cool, but after the conference, there is also developers, and they are all online, and we try to get this communication going on and on. And usually it helps if you speak up, or you post on your blog, or you tweet, or whatever you do in social media, but those things bubble up. If you have this remark and say, hey, why isn't this working here, but it is working there? And then somebody else says, yes, that's right, why isn't this working? And then he tweets about it, and then suddenly somebody wakes up and says, oh, that's actually a fun thing to test in Blender. I know it's very chaotic, but it is one of the benefits of an open source project that we have this dynamics working. And I like that sometimes better than having an official tracker system or so where people can post all those little complaints, because before you know it, you get like 10,000 of small ideas and nobody looking at it anymore. So I hope you don't feel disappointed or unempowered when you say, well, I have an idea and why is nothing happening with it? Well, you have to repeat it and then ask somebody else also to repeat it and talk about it and make noise, and then things happen. And that's not nice, but it is good dynamics, I think, to have this kind of things. And then you get those people to work for you. What? Huh? And he's very good at it, actually, to do this kind of noise. What also helps is making documentation. Because no way they are going to document anything, right? But what does he do? He makes nice videos and he's showing things. So you know that if you code something for Sebastian, he does your documentation and your videos, right? Yeah. Well, you didn't do the documentation, but you do the videos. Yeah, you do the videos, so... So we need more Sebastians. That's what you could do too. Yeah.
All right, so I have a comment and then a question. So I know you guys are all busy and there's roadmaps for what you guys want to do, but if you have any spare time and you get bored, I use Blender for a very specific thing of making full dome shows for planetariums. There are a couple things that make that easier. I already talked to people about the compositing part, if we could have some way to warp images to work on a dome in the compositor. Also in the viewport, if you look through a camera, just in the viewport, if it was able to warp it, make it easier for placing objects on the dome and things like that. And also freestyle support for the panoramic camera. I know these things are hard in a very specific case. But now my question is, I didn't know if this was intentional or not, but if you make a new scene in Blender and then you go to the list of default layouts like motion tracking or animating or whatever, if you change it when you're in a different scene, it changes the scene to the previous one that you used that was on that layer or on that scene. Oh, is it? All right. Sweet.
Just to repeat it for the microphone. It's you can change it in the user preferences.
Every Blender screen can have a scene. So you can have 10 screens and 10 different scenes. So if you control arrow to all the other screens, you can have different scenes, right? So sometimes it is mind-blowing, but it is sometimes for your workflow very nice that you can have all those variations in one Blender file. But also it can be destructive because sometimes you forget and all those scenes look alike and then you think you're working on scene 1 but you're actually destroying scene 2 or stuff like that. So that's when user requests come in and say, well, I want to have this global. So if I set this button, then there will always be one scene active in every screen. And that's why you probably get confused. That's why options and user presets should be avoided at all costs, right? Okay. Do we have still 5 minutes? Yeah?
Okay, so I don't know, there's new dependency graph work, and there is like even recently, I still, the very last thing I missed from 249, and yeah.
Local time offset.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So, when? The group time offset.
Group time offset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, there is a design doc how to do this with copyright approach, and it's maybe next month.
Next
somewhere.
month? I miss it.
Hopefully for the next conference,
you
you'll
like
be sitting
group
here
time
happy.
offset.
I love it, and I can use it.
Who coded group time offset?
Not me.
Like it anymore. I know. I added it also. Yeah, because it was that simple and easy to repeat animation on a different time. So you could have motion graphic style things, or for example, you had one character walking, and you can duplicate the whole character, and say give it a little bit of a time offset, and then they are walking both in a different time, and it looks good already. So it's very easy and quick to make animation. But it doesn't work with the dependency graph for updating, because the new dependency graph or blah 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 blah. At some moment, can you imagine, you have to update every character on a specific time. And if there is a time offset, you have to duplicate the data. That's 2 times data. Or you have to evaluate twice. So you get either double data uses or you get double CPU. What do you want?
Well, it's
want
always
it to be
double
slower
CPU.
or you want it to take more memory? You hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see, they don't care. Just do it.
Yes, good reasons.
Okay.
And then they complain that it is too slow or that it is too much memory.
No,
but,
it's not too slow. It's just double number of memory. That's fine. Memory is cheap.
I think people don't mind to buy more memory, right?
No, of course not.
So it's okay, yeah?
Yeah.
You have more than 8 gigabytes in your system? Yeah, 32?
Yeah, but I mean, usually I do it for smaller things, but like motion design, which is this kind of things, then I don't care about a few bit more memory, so I'm fine with it. Thank you.
So expanding Jan's comment, is it possible to have, for example, fisheye equidistant lens in the viewport?
Well, yes, it's well, it is possible that it needs to be done as a part of viewport compositor thing because you need like a GLSL thing for this to do mapping, as far as I'm concerned. No, fisheye for the viewport.
So, yeah, the original question was, is it possible to have different lens, for example, fisheye equidistant lens in the viewport?
Well, I know it fisheye.
Fish eye equidistant lens.
Yeah. So it works for render engines because there you know how to shoot the rays, but it doesn't work in the OpenGL viewport because there is no equivalent of fish eye in OpenGL itself. But it is possible to do using some compositor effects like some off-screen buffers and then do mapping in there and showing them in viewport in a proper way. So it is doable, but needs to be done as a part of viewport thingy. Maybe Mike wants to comment.
So
I don't have a whole lot to add about this, but I remember seeing something like Fisheye Quake back in the day, and I believe there was a hardware accelerated version of that. To dig through that old code from Artafel it'd give a start.
Well, yeah, it is possible, but our current gel code is not super easy, but it would even be possible, and I think we would just do it in viewport. I mean, then it should be possible to do all these things. Actually, well, yeah, pretty much all projection things could work in theory.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. First thing is it's an advice for people, even if I am not a Blender developer, I develop stuff. And when you request something, describe how it should work, because from a developer standpoint, sometimes people assume we know everything. I know I'm not from Blender, but sometimes we got requests, but no description how it's supposed to work, how it's supposed to. So that's the first advice for people who want to ask for Blender. And the other question is, when you do an exporter, what will be the best way to know what has been changed in the blend between the last time you saved it to only export what's needed and to optimize scripting?
Well, it's not currently possible. It's you can only know what was changed in between of dependency graph evaluation, but it happens quite often in Blender to update. But it's not really possible to know what was changed since previous save in time. There is no flag for this.
I mean, we added a system to detect changes. There's handlers to detect when scenes change, which is used by the render engine. By cycles like the viewport rendering, it's tracking all the data changes in Blender. The only issue with it is that it only really works well for data that Cycles uses, and it hasn't really been tested for other data.
It works for all the data now with new dependency graphs, so it keeps track on this. But then all of a sudden you have an issue. Okay, you need to create your own handler for file save, so you say, hey, everything is up to date, and then you handle object update handlers and say, hey, this was updated and needs to be saved. So it's a bit.
I mean, we could simply stash the change, and when the exporter requests it, you can just put the list of all change.
Well, we could have this, but currently it's all on your hands, and it's kind of possible. Yeah. So what?
Very quick. Who's developing in Linux? That's most of it. Who's doing Windows? You don't do Windows. You always refuse to do Windows bugs. Who does Windows bugs?
Who develops or not who develops for?
That develops using Windows a bit. Okay, 1, 2, 3. We need more Windows developers. A Mac? Also, still? Ja, de platform maintainer. But you don't do hardcore Mac stuff. Who's doing hardcore Mac stuff? You still, okay, because we need to get people, especially for Windows and Mac, to keep our Ghost library updated for the event systems and that kind of stuff. Like I saw this awesome demo from Daniel Martinez. He had his Windows tablet. And I know this parts of the stuff is not working there. And it's not very difficult. You have to do some touch and other APIs. It would be great if we can get Blender to be updated to work on modern hardware. The same thing is for Mac. It was fixed, but I spent lots of time when we had the Retina screen and touch tablets and that kind of things to keep it working. So we need a multi-platform development community. So if there are Windows hardcore developers here who like to help out, we welcome Windows developers, really. They are welcome, and Mac developers too. And of course Linux people, but there's only one last question.
Okay. All right, so a comment and a question. The comment, it's about 2.8. So the comment is, please don't care about compatibility, break everything, start from scratch because we need it. So we don't care about compatibility, please break everything. And the question is, when does it begin? Like, it's after 276, it's gone, start now, wipe it.
Yeah, yes, it's already started and we'll already define how we're going to develop
And
it.
for the next conference, we can expect to...
Purple, green
Beautiful, just make it pink.
It's magenta, it's not pink.
So what do you guys want? Hey, very quick, what do you guys want to kick out of Blender most? What do you really want to kick out of Blender? What do you really want to kick out of Blender?
So, me?
Yeah.
The
particle system.
The what?
For if we go to 2.8, what do you say? We really have to get rid of what? Say it. Say it.
Blender internal game engine, sequencer, texture nodes.
The sequencer?
Yeah, sequencer.
The sequencer. Oh, you hear people crying.
No.
Okay. Well, we will put something better back, right?
Yes. Compositor and then viewport, logic editor.
Everything.
Yeah.
The modifiers.
Yeah.
So we throw away everything and then we start over. Huh? We keep the 2.5 stuff. So then, okay, a little bit.
So int main, return 0, and done.
Okay, thank you guys. All right, applause.
Thank you.
Just take cycles standalone and read to run the rest.